A lot of artists, because of situations with certain materials not being readily available, or because they want to experiment with it, are turning to other materials. This one by Bruce Hudgens, a Navajo silversmith from lives in Prescott, uses agate and carnelian. Some artists are beginning to use lapis in their work. Dwayne Moctezuma, who's a Hopi Laguna artist, has begun using what used to be called glass slag, but now that it's become more valuable, it's been dubbed and renamed Rosarita. And he uses it for a red color in place of coral. It's harder, it's more durable, it's eco-friendly, doesn't involve harvesting coral. And so a lot of artists are experimenting with new stones and combinations of stones on it. A lot of that, again, goes back to Charles Lolema, who used turquoise for its color value, almost as a paint, really, rather than because it was high grade. And some artists now are beginning to fully understand and appreciate that, and using, for example, doing inlay work with a variety of pieces of alabaster, which is a sculpture material for the most part, but being used for inlay now because you get an interesting range of color. And if you have a good sense of color and color balance, you can create some very unusual pieces using that material, which also has a side benefit to the artist of being far less expensive than buying turquoise. And this is the once innovative, now classic squash blossom necklace, which actually is a wonderful example of how foreign technology, foreign materials, and foreign design all come together, get adapted and adopted by artists from the Southwest, and come up with something that's distinctly theirs. The squash blossom originated from the pomegranate blossom that Spanish gentlemen from the town of Granada, or pomegranate, wore as an emblem of their city. In a very short period of time, the Navajos began elongating the blossom, decreasing the size of the bulb to make it similar to the squash blossom, which they were much more familiar with. The silver they worked with, again, introduced by the Spanish, and the blossom, the naja at the bottom, naja is a Navajo word for crescent, was adapted by the Spanish from the Moors to ward off the evil eye. It was adopted by the Indians in the Southwest because it looked like a crescent or planting moon. And that fleur-de-lis that the Spanish used to associate with the French royal house, to the Navajo standpoint, was, if you invert it, a young corn plant. So it made a lot of sense as essentially symbolic of planting moon and a young plant. You get into someone like Steve Yellowhorse's work, whose work is more than an evolution, it's a revolution. He sandwiches the silver between pieces of fabric and rolls it through a hand rolling mill, and that imparts the texture. Then he does this amazing curl, and in some cases knots, of his work. And it's been really quite delightful. I've never asked him how to do it, and I'm not sure he would tell me even if I did. But he manages to tie knots in the silver without leaving any tool marks. He does it after he's polished the silver, and it has spring to it, which you only get by annealing the silver, or tempering the silver. He's figured it out somehow, and creates something that's unlike anything anybody else has ever done before. And so far, at least, nobody else has figured out his secret. I was interviewing him for a book that I was working on, and he explained that he drew his inspiration from jazz and architecture. And when he did this, I thought, this is Frank Gehry. And then I saw Frank Gehry's jewelry that he was making for Tiffany, and I thought, you know what, Steve Yellowhorse out-Gehrys Frank Gehry.